And now, without further delay, let's get started with today's event, sponsored by Oracle and hosted by American Banker. I would now like to turn things over to your moderator, Michael Sisk.
Thanks very much, Aaron, and I would like to welcome the audience once again. We are very grateful that you've chosen to share some of your day with us. We know that your time is valuable, and we'll honor that today with what I'm confident is going to be an enlightening 60 minutes or so of discussion. Once again, our topic today is Designing Banking for the Digital Generation. And my name is Michael Sisk. I'll be your moderator today. I've been a New York-based journalist for about 15 years, and I've had stints as investor editor at Red Herring and editor-at-large at American Banker. And my articles have also appeared in Barron's, Crane's New York Business, Inc., Institutional Investor, Strategy in Business and Worth. And I've co-written and edited a couple of books. The most recent was Merge Ahead, Mastering the 5 Enduring Trends of Artful M&A. More important, however, we have an excellent speaker today who I would like to welcome and introduce to you, Aubrey Hawes. Aubrey is a senior director in Oracle's Financial Services Global Business Unit, focusing on digital, pricing, and billing solutions. In this position, he is responsible for product marketing of the Oracle Digital Banking Solutions and Oracle Revenue Management and Billing. He has over 20 years of experience working with global financial services companies, including National Australia Bank, Suncorp Bank, KeyBank, Northern Trust, China Trust Commercial Bank, CIBC, and many others. Previously, he worked for IBM, Eontech, and Cybol in various software development, project management, product management, and marketing roles. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from the University of South Carolina and a Master's Certificate in Project Management from George Washington University. And we're very, very pleased to have Aubrey with us today. And just before we jump into the real kind of meat of the program today, I wanted to just reiterate a couple things that Aaron said at the top of the hour. We do have 2 polls today, and I always encourage 100% participation if at all possible. We do share the results, and it's kind of a nice way for everyone here to see where other folks stand on the topic that we've come together to discuss. So please check those boxes when the time comes, if you will. And we also have Q&A. We usually have about 10 or 15 minutes set aside at the very end for questions. As Aaron said, you don't have to wait until the end to put your question into the queue. You can type that in, as it occurs to you along the way, and we encourage you to do that. Also, if we run out of time, we don't get to your question, which sometimes happens, we will follow up afterward. So please fear not, your voice will be heard. Please ask anything that you'd like. And with that, I think that kind of brings me to the end of my little spiel here. I will be back doing polls later on, but for now, I'd like to turn you over to the very capable hands of Aubrey. Aubrey, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, Michael, and I appreciate for you letting us do this webinar, and again allowing us to talk to you here in the middle of your day. Hopefully, what we have to present, you guys will find very engaging and insightful. This is on the back of a new product that Oracle launched about 2-3 weeks back, called the Oracle Banking Digital Experience. And really, the change that we see is happening in the digital market, and so hopefully you guys will find this an insightful session. So let's get started. So this is Oracle's safe harbor statement. I'm required to include this in any kind of presentations here in case I make any statements around our product capability. So let's get started with the content. So part of this, the theme of this presentation is around how do you react and deal with digital? Digital has recently all been about disruption, and this kind of waves of disruption that's really been happening quite acutely for the past 20 or so years. And if you kind of go look at what really happened in the 90s, this was really kind of the start of this really rapid pace of digital disruption that was happening. So, it was all about music and photography, all going digital, video rentals. I was actually presenting at Oracle Open World last week, and one of the guys I was jointly presenting with made the comment that that Blockbuster had the opportunity to kind of buy Netflix back in the day, and they kind of passed on that. So it's kind of an interesting as you look at the backdrop of all these digital waves of innovation. Retail, this is where kind of Amazon was kind of just starting to kind of get their start. If you move into the 2000s, this is when you're starting to see things around how do you book travel, how do I recruit, how do I put myself out there to be recruited. All of that stuff just started to change as all of those businesses came online and went digital. And then if you really look at what's happened in the 2010s, it all gets back into retailing is changing again, but it's not all about the e-commerce. It's around how do I market to someone digitally, and the ability to have these ads that will follow you and interact with customers across social media. Same things happening in automotive. It's not just about all these car sharing sites or car sharing services. The whole buying experience now, if you're going to go buy a car, is completely different. You don't walk into the dealer to go back and discover the products, right? You do all your research online and then go there. And now finance is really starting to see that same thing. So what's interesting is it's not just been one industry. It's kind of this continual waves of disruption. And so if you look at that as a backdrop, what's actually kind of interesting is it's not just that these industries are getting disrupted. There's been a huge kind of financial impact around these. So these are some research that we were able to find. The references are there at the bottom of the slide. But if you look at music, comparing, most of these kind of compare 2000 with 2014, is, music's about half the size market that it once was. So, I mean, a great deal of changing. If you look at NASDAQ, the trading floor revenues have drastically changed. It's about a third, and this was in part due to the decimalization, where they went from fractional trading of shares to decimalization. If you take a look at advertising, and this is a U.S.-centric number, what's interesting is, the print and people that subscribing to newspapers or print newspapers is drastically changing. So you can see that that's about a third of what the print advertising business was in 2000. What's interesting is if you add digital back into that for the U.S. newspaper digital subscriptions plus print, that gets up to about 23 billion. So it's still drastically kind of changed as a result of the digitization of news. If you look at retailing, this is actually kind of the one inverse. In 2000, e-commerce was really not even 1% of the annual spend. Now it's almost 6%. But what's interesting is that is where all the growth in retail spending is coming from. It's all going to digital. So with that kind of as the backdrop, it's kind of like saying, so why is this happening? What is driving this change to go back and do things in a better, faster, more digital way? And so there's a couple of interesting statistics here. The left-hand version of this slide came from Forrester around how they view disruptors. And what's interesting, with the advent of cloud computing, it used to be very, very expensive to go back and to start a business, try to go back and disrupt something. But the cost is about 1/10 of what it used to be. And as a result, you've got 10 times the number of people doing it, which has, kind of a net effect of 10 times the power. So it's just so much more cost effective to go back and disrupt that more and more people are doing it. I think if you kind of contrast that with looking at the slide on the left, or kind of to look at the trends, this kind of contrasts what happens in 1 minute online in 2012 versus 2014, and just the rapid pace of change. And the one I like to pick out when I look at this is I look at Google, and Google in 2012, I think a lot of people have said, that's a pretty mature technology space. But if you look at in those 2 years, the searches is almost 5-fold more than what was in 2012. So it's just the pace of technology adoption and usage of these things is only getting faster and faster. This is an interesting slide that I got from Brett King's Banking 3.0 book, which is he talks about once you get 50 million users of some piece of technology or some technology or service, then you kind of have a defined market type. And so what's interesting is if you kind of look at this, airplanes and the telephone, these all took 60 years to kind of reach that target. Credit cards took about 28 years. Debit card took 12 years. And part of this is getting cut off on the slide. Contactless credit cards took like 4 years. PayPal, 4 years. So this pace of innovation is only getting faster and faster. It's not like you can say, hey, I want to wait and see what happens. Because what's happening is you'll get past if that's the case. So it's only getting faster and faster. And if you look at this kind of the state of all of this stuff getting faster, if we go back and kind of drill in and say, what's the state of FinTech globally, we'd actually say it's booming. I mean, just to say that $14 billion has been invested in the last 12 months in FinTechs is just kind of shocking. That's just a huge number. And what's interesting, if you look at it, they're all really going after really three target segments. It's around payments, and this can be person-to-person payments, remittances, lots of different types of things. You've got lending. This is all from student lending. This is lending clubs, peer-to-peer lending, and then the one that's really starting to get a lot more traction is this whole concept of personal financial management in the form of robo-investing and robo-advisors. So that's kind of where it's going. It's interesting you take a look at this, the top 10 privately funded FinTech. So this is not this doesn't include the PayPals of the world or Apple as they're now starting into the payment stream. But the top 10 privately funded all represent a total market cap of almost $50 billion. My boss was at Oracle Open World talking about how the top 100 FinTechs, or top 80 FinTechs, I think, represent about $100 billion in market cap. So what's interesting, it's not just 10 of these companies. It's almost 1,300 companies, and these things are growing, every month. That number gets larger. And what's interesting is, what's the overall theme is they're doing everything in real time, better transparency, and for almost free. So they're really trying to kind of attack and kill the banks by kind of 1,000 kind of paper cuts type stuff. So with that kind of as a backdrop, we're going to open it up to our first polling question. So back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Aubrey. And yes, as promised, first question of two that we'll have today. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead, I'll read the question, read the three different answers here or selections you guys can make, and when I'm done with that, hopefully we will have all the responses that we need. So, should FinTech be considered a partner or a competitor to banks? And pretty straightforward answers here. It's a partner. It should be considered a competitor, or perhaps both. So if everyone with us could make a choice, and then I will share the results with everyone here in just a moment. And we will be off to the races with the rest of the program. That's probably enough time. I will go ahead now and push the results to everyone. And by far, almost three-quarters of you said both, that it's FinTech should be considered a partner and a competitor. Interesting. And let me turn things back over to Aubrey.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's interesting results, and I would say that it's fairly consistent with what we've heard from some of the other geographies. Primarily, I've been having a fair amount of meetings with a lot of the European and Asian banks. And they would typically have come back and said, yeah, it's both. It kind of depends on the segments. It's interesting, if you go back and look at the top two segments, which were payments and lending, we typically hear in the payment space, they view them without a doubt as a competitor, or that's been kind of the consensus feedback I've gotten. And in the lending space, it's clearly viewed as a partner, because this can be a source of leads for that. So that's good. It's good to hear that the North American banks are kind of thinking the same thing for the most part. So that's good. So let me advance forward and we'll get back to the program here. There we go. For a second, I wasn't thinking my slide was advancing. So what digital strategies does Oracle see in play? So part of what we like to do is, if you look at all of that digital disruption, the state of FinTech, Oracle really views ourselves as a partner to the banks to go back and help them deal with all this digital disruption and to offer solutions that will allow them to gain market share and control cost. And if you see that as a backdrop, what we really see is there are four primary strategies that we're helping banks kind of execute on. First and foremost is, and I'll just tell you too, I've got a kind of detailed slide on each one of these to give you some examples as to what we're typically talking about. So first and foremost is launching a digital brand. And so typically what we see banks here doing that says, I want to stand up a new digital brand that's separate from my existing brand because I want to deliver a different brand promise. I want to deliver a different customer experience. I may want to compete differently from a pricing perspective. So it really says, I want to go back and do things differently. So that's kind of this digital brand. Second theme says, if I want to go compete in a digital world, I have to have a digital set of processes. I can't work with a set of analog processes. that involves pushing a paper. I really truly have to set up a set of digital processes that allows me to go back and compete effectively in there. The big process that we see there is origination or customer onboarding, which says that's one of these processes where I really got to look at saying, how can I go back and digitize that? Because that is what the market is really asking for. Third is kind of a modern digital experience. I need to modernize my experience so that it looks more like what all the other digital experiences my customers are seeing, whether that's from Amazon or from Google or Apple. I need to be able to deliver something modern and responsive across lots of different channels. And then lastly, what we're saying is, it says, how do we help you look at a bank launching a new set of digital capabilities? So this is not new internet banking or new mobile banking. This says, how can I deliver some type of new digital asset? Maybe that's a payment-to-payment service that's standalone that targets everyone in a certain geographic or market area, or other things, and I've got some other examples around that. So these are really these broad 4 strategies. We'll kind of walk through each one and give you guys some different examples of Oracle customers, as well as just some other customers that aren't Oracle customers that are kind of validating that these are really kind of the right strategies to go forward. So if we look at launch a digital brand, I've got 3 different examples. 2 are in Europe, 1 is in Asia. mBank is a Polish-based bank. What's interesting with mBank is they launched the digital brand. The digital brand has basically consumed the traditional brand, and now this is the brand they go to market with. Second is Fidor Bank. It's a German-based bank that have launched about 3-4 weeks back in the UK. We know they have their eye on entering the US market. And then lastly is Ubank, which is a big Oracle customer. It is backed and owned by National Australia Bank in Australia, and that was their digital brand. What I think is interesting is if you look at all of these different examples, they all focused on customer onboarding and customer acquisition. So mBank would talk about this 30-second secure loan approvals. Fidor Bank had pre-approved all customers for a €100 loan. All they had to do was kind of activate it with their phone. NAB pioneered, and this was probably 5 years back, a 5-minute online account opening process. And what's interesting is they captured how do you deliver this frictionless origination process, and they got huge market uptake. So you can kind of look at the stats right there across all of them. NAB, for example, hitting their 2-year customer acquisition target in the first 6 months. So what that kind of says is a digital strategy really can work, but it's only going to go back and work if you figure out how do you make it easy to onboard customers. If we look at digitize the processes, we'll start first kind of here on the upper left-hand corner. The best process you need to go back and digitize is the origination. And part of the reason you want to go back and do that is you need to figure out a way so that you can drive transparency and take out cost around this process. So what's interesting is if you look at National Australia Bank, this was an Oracle example where we work with them. They took their mortgage origination from 6 weeks to 6 days. I'm trying to read the slide and I shouldn't. I should be just telling my story. They went from 6 weeks to 6 days, and part of that was all through automation. They streamlined everything, had 2 tasks that they did not automate that they wanted a person to look at. One was to verify the upload of the person's salary statement. They wanted eyeballs on that to validate it, even though they could use some type of OCR technology. And then secondarily, they had automated appraisals, but if the loan was for more than $500,000, what they wanted to do was, again, someone to put eyeballs on that from really just to kind of from a reduced risk perspective. But all kind of automation you can get. Another example was with Suncorp Bank, and what they wanted to do was they rolled out a new unsecured personal loan origination. Their target was someone that's in an electronics store, allow them to originate and have funds in their account so they can buy the big screen TV while they're in the store, and in 11 minutes they'll actually have the funds in their account. And what the interesting thing is they were able to roll that whole service out in 8 weeks. The other thing around the digital process is to give you transparency. One of the interesting things that National Australia Bank did was they gave transparency into the process. Just like, if I order my new iPhone 6, I can actually track that from the factory in China to showing up at my doorsteps. Why don't banks do the same things with a mortgage? So they can actually see where their mortgage going through that process, because to most customers, they don't think they're buying a mortgage. They're buying a home. It's an emotional decision, so they can actually go see where this is. So those are that's really the classic process you can go back and originate. Second one is around kind of relationship pricing. And what's interesting here is this is the number one reason after bad service that someone's going to leave your bank is around the overall charges and fees. And the ability to go back and say, listen, I want to go back and drive a relationship price for my customer based on all the accounts and services that they may have across multiple product lines, allows me to drive value. And the ability to go back and do this from a digital perspective, meaning I don't have to change my existing core banking system, can drive tremendous value, because they can start to see the value of pricing me on that total relationship value. The other two examples aren't necessarily Oracle capability, but it's kind of to go back and highlight, if you digitize the right process, customers will come. So remote deposit capture, I'm pretty sure all 200 of us who are on this call know what this capability means. What's interesting is, no one used to even track this 3 years ago, or pre-iPhone introduction. And now, Bank of America includes in their annual report what percent of its checks get rendered that way. And according to Celent, a third of the U.S. population is going to use that to capture all checks. So the point here is, you digitize the right kind of process, customers will come. You look at the corporate side of the bank, EBAM was kind of delivering the same capability. Instead of doing paper-based process and fax machines, Swift kind of pioneered the idea of doing this electronic bank account management to get straight through process around there. So you digitize the right process, customers will come, you'll get huge cost savings around this. So if we look at modernizing the digital experience, so kind of what we see as the top themes, first and foremost, is all this responsive design. I don't want to go back and deliver experiences for us that's unique to a smartphone, unique to a tablet, unique to a wearable, unique to an internet browser, unique to a kiosk, you name it. I need to be able to create an experience that can be dynamically rendered or responsive on the device type that it is. You want to deploy technologies like HTML5. Mobile apps is hot, or hybrid apps, so you can go back and deliver these HTML5 screens inside of kind of a packaged app. This Internet of Things, so I want to go back and support lots of different types of devices. And then kind of what I would say last is the most recent theme, where you've seen a lot of companies out there talking about it, whether that's Silicon Valley Bank, Dwala Ignite is around API banking that says, I just want to expose, in addition to my own experience, I want to just expose services out there, and I'm going to let my customers or partners go back and consume those services and go build their own experience. There's lots of good use cases here. KeyBank is one of our customers that we're working with to help them modernize their digital channels. Digital, when you look at modernizing the experience, most banks had about 10 sets of capabilities, because digital wasn't, or self-service digital wasn't their first channel. It was all about me too, having the exact same capabilities as everyone else. Now this is about, how do I differentiate myself, and how do I maybe have 25% of the capability that's the exact same, versus saying I want to, and have 75% of that that's different. So KeyBank is one of the banks that we're working with. Some of the other brands that you've got up there, Capital One's been a big, huge acquirer in this space, acquiring a bunch of design firms to really focus on that. BBVA was simple. PNC, calling out just a few really good banks that I think kind of get the value of driving that modern experience. Lastly, we'll go into launch new digital capability, and these are really just 3 examples. I think you could kind of expand upon these 3 examples. What we'd say is kind of the top theme, and this probably was the top theme about 2 years ago, was around payments, from a person-to-person payment. So you had folks like Barclays launching a service called Ping It. Danske Bank up in the Nordics launched the mobile pay experience. Combank in Australia launched Kaching. So these were all kind of in-country payment-to-payment services that allowed them to go back and move money to different customers that maybe didn't all bank at the same place. Also, you have this whole digital payments, what's going on with Apple Pay, American Express. One of our unique customers is Zap, which is owned by VocaLink, and they are a mobile an in-person payments disruptor that's really running on the UK's faster payment systems to go back and process payment transactions in conjunction with banks at a much reduced cost perspective. Second theme is around wallets, and this is one of the things that we're seeing is not all banks that I've talked to are ready to throw in the towel and let Apple and Google win the digital wallet space. So a lot of them are also investing. We've seen Capital One in this space as well. Oracle has some capability to do this as well. What's also interesting is, I think, financial inclusion, and this kind of started early in Africa with M-Pesa, but what's really interesting is if you go look at a market like China, you see a lot of the big FinTechs in China are the huge tech firms like Tencent and Alibaba that are getting into the financial services market to drive inclusion, and in some cases, they're also getting asked to go back and put together kind of the credit reporting agencies because those did not really exist in those markets. So they're really looking at those to kind of help drive and set the standards for them. So with that, I think we have our next polling question. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, indeed we do. Second poll of the day, and this one is a little bit different. We want to, it says here, which digital strategies is your bank deploying? It says please select the most relevant one. Actually, we'd like you to select whichever ones you want. So you can select multiple answers to this question. So once again, let me just give everyone a few minutes to do that. I'll read through the question again and the different options, and then we should probably have all the results we need. So which digital strategies is your bank deploying? Launch digital brand, digitize processes, modernize digital experiences, and we actually have modernized digital experiences another time here.
Oh, that's a typo. So that really that last one should be launch new digital capability. So okay. I don't know what happened there. We made a last-minute decision to make this a multiple. You can select more than one. So let's see what happens with the results.
And I'm sorry, Aubrey. What was the last one? How should that read?
It should have meant launch new digital capability.
Okay, great. So thank you for that. The number 4 is launch new digital capabilities. And we'll give everyone just another moment or two, given the little complexity we've added there for you. We'll just give you another moment to make a selection, or multiple selections, whichever. And okay, that's probably enough time. I will go ahead and share here. And so modernized digital experiences, 70%, and very close to that is digitized processes at 68.6. So thank you, everyone, for participating in that. And Aubrey, let me turn things back over to you.
Okay, perfect. This is good. So this is part of the reason we changed that is if we thought at first we could only allow you to choose one, and this is one of these where we see most banks doing, not just one of these strategies. They're typically deploying multiples of these strategies because you can't just go with one strategy. So it's kind of good that you guys are seeing those same results. So let me drop now into the to the Oracle capability and what we actually have to help deliver that. And so I'll ask for technical support because so the technical person, can they help me do the build out on this slide? And I'll start talking to it. So the new product offering Oracle launched about 2 to 3 weeks back is a solution called Oracle Banking Digital Experience. And what we're trying to talk about doing is kind of redefining the access between, so never mind, I figured out how to do the build there real quick, is redefining access between customers and bankers. And I think part of this whole shift where in the past, self-service was all about internet mobile capability that the bank owned. And I think what we see happening with digital is becoming, this is really the front door to the bank. It's more than just what happens at my own channels that I own. It's actually how can I go back and participate in other channels that I may not own, whether that's a real estate website or a car website or other things like that. So a couple of things that are a part of this solution. First and foremost, there's a rich UX framework that we have that allows you to build rich and modern experiences for the customer that are responsive design using the latest and greatest technology. So I'll kind of take you through that capability, and I've kind of got a detailed slide for each one of these. Secondarily is a set of services that are disconnected from the presentation layer, so that these are not channel-specific services, but services that can be called and used across a variety of different channels. And these processes, from a technology perspective, are RESTful processes, which allows a user experience developer to go back and create rich user experiences without having to understand how all of banking and how all of core banking kind of works. And so we have a rich repository of about 250 services that are broadly broken across retail, corporate, investment, or wealth, common, and kind of framework components. This capability then works with these digital processes that I was talking about before, like originations and pricing, so that it can work in conjunction with capability that Oracle has, or this is where we can work in conjunction with other third-party suppliers or other pieces that a customer may have chose. All of this stuff here in the blue box is core independent, meaning it can integrate with your existing core banking systems, or it can integrate with Oracle's core banking systems. But what we really see is, to go back and drive a digital agenda, you should not have to go back and change your core banking system. All of this capability is an enterprise class capability, and this is kind of going back and making that point. When you want to look at digital and how do you deliver digital capability, you need to really focus on delivering enterprise class set of capability, whether that's in security, whether that's in content management, document management, or workflow. And I know we probably have a mixed audience, so I won't go into all the detailed technology pieces around that. Complementing this, on the left-hand side, is Oracle's Customer Experience Cloud. And so what's interesting here is Oracle has acquired a ton of capability. We spent about $3 billion acquiring a rich set of capability recently in the marketing and social spaces. So we focus on everything from offline retail purchase transaction to anonymized third-party data from a company called Blue Kai, rich email marketing capability in the form of Responsys and Eloqua. And what all of this capability allows you to go back and do is, say, start your engagement with your customer while they're on Zillow.com or while they're on Cars.com. You can actually start to target and engage your customer and then drive them to your website, so that then you can do the onboarding or the origination of that product type and then manage that overall fulfillment. Same thing could happen on the social channels, where you can do social listening as to what's going on and drive social engagement around there, engage with your customers across all those channels. And so I think that's when you got to start to think of this difference between digital banking versus just self-service banking. There's so many more channels where you can have that. And those capabilities are complemented by the capability that Oracle has had around the Sales and Service Cloud. We also see ties back into third-party components to do things like image recognition capabilities. So there's a way to kind of provide a rich solution where all of those components don't come from just Oracle. So let me just talk to you a little bit about the UX frameworks, and then I'm going to try to give you a little brief demonstration. Sometimes it's hard to do on the webinar, but at least want to give you a taste of what this experience looks like. So first and foremost, when we designed the UX piece of this, we focused on supporting standards. So it's HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. We focused on a responsive design, again, meaning that it can be dynamically rendered across all these different devices that your customers may have. It supports kind of a single-page application where I can kind of continue to scroll through data and access data. You can draw, all the services are consumed via RESTful APIs. So these APIs are easy to be consumed, coarse grain, kind of core independent, so it makes it easier to work. And then what we decided to do was to deliver this and develop it using open source technologies. So the primary one is Knockout.js, but there's several sets of these capabilities that we really decided, instead of going back and building a proprietary tool, we really wanted to leverage open source technologies that most kids coming out of college can become productive in a very quick time using these technologies. Some even in high school, coming out that are quite adept at how they use these technologies. A lot of times I get the question around that bottom one, which is the SaaS, and that's not a typo. It's not supposed to be software as a service. That stands for stylistically awesome style sheets. Let me go forward, and I'm going to now attempt to go do this demonstration here. So let me share my screen. And it's a little bit slow on the buffer side, so I'm going to try to talk behind the talk track. So this is would be the bank's homepage before they actually log in. They will have a rich set of content. I'm going to scroll down, and we can look at things such as, I want to see how much I can save with savings calculators. I may have things like different targeted offers. And again, what's interesting is if you look at these offers could be static offers that everyone sees, or you can leverage the digital marketing capability of the Oracle Customer Experience Cloud that says, based on your browsing history, we're going to throw up offers that are really pertinent to actually what's happening, with your customer. So you can really apply a lot of smarts behind driving that. You can also embed content like videos and all other kind of things on the homepage. So what's really interesting here is not so much, most of you guys would kind of expect that most banks do have a modern homepage. What I'm going to do is kind of resize this down to my smartphone size to highlight the responsive nature of the design. So what we see happens is I now get a hamburger menu here where I can see my menu options because this is all now designed for my smartphone. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and log into the application. So when John Doe logs into the application, from a self-service perspective, he can actually take a look at his different accounts. He can scroll across and see, for example, how much he actually has in his savings account. They can look at recent or pending transactions. And what I'll do is, I know that screen's awful small, so we'll maximize that back up to kind of the full page. And one of the comments that I like to make here is, most banks have focused on how they did a lot of that responsive new experience on their .com page, but once they log in, typically you're walking back in time from a usability perspective, maybe 5 to 8 years. And so they don't have something that's quite as modern and robust. So here we can see all their different accounts. You can see recent or pending transactions. You can look at their spending categorization. You can look at different budgets, any kind of goals. So they may want to set a goal, such as savings for a new car. We can see that, as well as we would 100% have targeted offers here for the customer. So once they've absolutely logged in, even if you're not leveraging that whole digital marketing solution, you 100% can do specifically targeted offers here. So with that, I'm going to log out of that experience. I'm going to walk through and show you kind of a borrowing example for an anonymous user. So for an anonymous user, let's say someone wants to go look, for example, at personal loans. When they say they want to go back and look at personal loans, they can look at those different loan offerings, or they can say, help me decide. And if I say help me decide, what this will leverage is a product called OPA, called Oracle Policy Administration, that allows you to go back and come back and do some needs assessment around determining what's the right product. So we'll say something like, I want to borrow for a home improvement need. I can say that I want to borrow $10,000, and I did this demo in Australia last week, so I didn't have time to change it. For 10,000 Australian dollars, I want it for about 24 months. I want a variable loan rate, and yes, I'd like to make some additional payments around that. And then once I've done that, it will come back with a couple of different recommendations, and I can say I want to go back and apply for a variable rate loan. Once we do that, I'm now in a position to go back and start to capture those details. One of the things that we do have here on this page, if you look at that question mark icon in the lower right-hand corner, this is my collaboration tool that allows me to do things like code browsing, video chat, click to call, click to chat, all of these kind of different services. So it really takes a look at how do I go back and tie this back in with a bigger, larger servicing platform so that someone gets stuck, that can actually help them through that process. So we're going to get started here. We'll select the repayment frequency and all of those other details for this loan. We'll calculate that it's $436 a month is what my payment's going to be. Next, we'll prompt them for the steps involved and different documentation steps. We'll accept those terms and conditions, and now we'll start the application process. So now it's going to ask me to input income and expense details. What we're going to do here is, because I'm sure you guys don't want to see me type in a bunch of details here, we'll go back and just use an existing customer, Sue, which will actually pre-populate this with all of her details. So again, what we're trying to look at doing is, hey, from a digital perspective for existing customers, how do we make it really easy for these customers to kind of go back and pre-initialize all these if they're an existing customer so we can capture those details. So we'll say we're going to continue. It says right now I'm looking good based on my income level for this loan. And we, for example, can look at the process bar as to really the next set of steps as to where we're going to go with this. We'll continue on. I want to show one other piece of this. So now, since I'm already an existing customer, all my details come through from my registration, contact, and identity. I want it to capture my occupation details, and kind of what we've thought of here is instead of prompting me to type all these details in, we're building interfaces to people like LinkedIn. Again, think digital, right? Most of these digital customers are all going to have their profile on out there. Why not allow them to go back and access that data to go pull those details forward and kind of allow them to go back and continue. So that kind of gives you a taste of how that works. I'll show you one last demonstration. I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log back in as Sue again, and this is just to kind of give you a view of, you can have loans in several different stages, and part of this is, again, that transparency. Think of that, tracking my iPhone to China to my own house. I may have several different loans. One's that's 20% complete. It's in a draft status I haven't completed. I could have something approved in principle. I could have gone back and done acceptance, or I'm looking at loan dispersal. And if I want to, I can go back and drill down and kind of start that process so I can actually go back and upload documents, do acceptance. Most of your customers have a scanner in their phone. So it's kind of getting from that mindset as to around where they're going. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you from a demonstration perspective. We also have a mobile wallet demonstration that's quite intriguing as well, but we'll do that as kind of a follow-up item one-on-one. So let me go to the next slide here. So just to give you a taste for all of the capabilities. So again, I talked about having 250 RESTful services, and these are, again, channel independent. We've categorized these into 16 different buckets. So these do things like origination, and this is kind of a representative list. Origination, payments and transfers, person-to-person payments. CFI stands for Customer Financial Insight. We could have inserted a third polling question, but I kind of know the results here. I typically ask how many customers, create a budget and track their spend on a monthly basis, and I get anywhere from 10 to 15% of the customers that do this. And Customer Financial Insight is all about how do you deliver lightweight FinApp goal setting to get customers to change behavior, not really get them to kind of do that full PFM. The next row are typically more product-centric services. Again, these aren't core banking services. These are what integrate in with your core banking system. So things like, redeeming a term deposit or a CD, loan payoff, credit cards, or mutual funds. Here's the next 8. The next 8 focus on things like customer services, alerts and notification, inquiries, security, and again, security is externalized because it needs to be an enterprise set of capability. File uploads, cash management, trade finance, and foreign exchange are all things that are really more focused on the commercial side of the bank or SME. And then virtual accounts is to go back and support wallets. How do you go back and deliver a rich kind of wallet experience that is outside of the Google, or in addition to what you do with Google and Apple. Next slide here, I've got about 2 or 3 slides, and then we'll open it up here to questions. The way that we're delivering these services, we actually have a full repository. So this is for the technology folks that are on the call. These RESTful processes we're delivering in a tool called Swagger that kind of gives you access to this full set of repositories, which allows you to look at the documentation for these APIs. And this is what becomes a very developer-friendly or partner-friendly capability for someone to go back and consume these. So I'll go to the next slide. This gives you an example. So you can see certain things like the details for it, the JSON payload, and even the ability to go out and try out this service. So again, if I'm one of these new developers, I can go back and use it. It becomes quite easy to go back and do that. I can see this documentation associated with these services. So let me wrap up here on this one slide, Michael, and then we'll open it up to questions. So you can think about what's the first one you want to fire over to me. If you look at Oracle's strategy for digital, it's really around 4 things. One, we see using digital to drive a simplification agenda. And I think one of the things, if you look back at the FinTechs where we kind of started on this webinar, they're all about focusing around delivering simple, transparent experiences. And so our belief is with digital, you really have to look at saying, how do I use this to drive simplification into the enterprise versus taking the complexities of the enterprise and putting it online. So I think that's the first piece of our strategy. Second is we're aligning this with the other investments that Oracle is making in the digital business platform. So Oracle, as I said earlier, we've spent about $3 billion, that's billion with a B, acquiring companies that are really all around how do you take companies into this digital area, not just financial services companies. And so in our financial services global business unit, this is where we see the ability for us to scale for what we do that's financial services specific, like setting a financial goal, originating an account, doing originating a letter of credit, doing a foreign exchange, tying it back into how do you do digital marketing. So we see this kind of combination of the two really provide something unique. Third, and cloud is something that is extremely important to Oracle. We see this as a huge accelerator for where we go, but we also are looking at choice. So this capability, we offer choice as to whether or not you want to consume this as an on-premise service, or do you want to consume it as a software as a service in the cloud. And then lastly is kind of this componentized open architecture. I think what we really see is it's important to allow banks, and we work with a lot of large, complex banks that they're not going to change everything. They need to be able to go back and consume a piece, whether that's I want to launch a mobile wallet and that's it. I'm happy with everything else I have for internet banking and mobile banking, or it says help me modernize my full digital channels, or help me stand up a digital bank. So they're really, it's across that broad spectrum that we can kind of assist and help people to do. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over. I think we've got about 7 or 8 minutes to answer some questions.
We sure do. And that we do have some great questions here in the queue, and I'm just looking through them now. Let's see here. It's sort of a 2-part question, but it's sort of distinct here. Okay. Do expedited digitized processes result in a higher rate of delinquency or non-performing credit? How do you see banks mitigating this risk?
So I think this was a great question. So this was one of the ones that I kind of flagged as high when it came across, so thank you for submitting this one. I think what's critical in the digital process is, first and foremost, how do you flag the ones that you see are going to be higher and kick them out of the process? So it's kind of like saying, just not unlike what you're doing with other channels, it says, how do you flag the right ones, kick them out of the process so you have the least amount of time invested in doing this. But I think it all gets back into having the proper controls in place so that you can make the right decisions. And where you can automate those decisions with business rules that are a part of these workflow engines, this is where you can go back and mitigate that risk around not having high delinquency or non-performing assets because you didn't do a good enough job. And so I think that's one of the important things to understand. When we worked with those couple of banks to do this, they really were focusing on how do I automate the process so that I actually get the right kind of assets onboarded that I want, and how do I also eliminate the ones that I definitely don't want in the quickest amount possible. It's just how do you apply business rules and automation to the types of things that I used to do manually, because that will give me scale. And I think if you do those right, then you're not going to have a huge issue with kind of delinquencies and non-performing type assets as a result of that.
Excellent, thanks. All right, great. I appreciate everyone's questions that are coming in. Keep them coming. Next question: how does regulation impact digital banking?
So this is interesting. So I think that regulation definitely does impact it, and I think that this is where the banks need to work with the regulators to go back and push for changes and adoption and new standards. I think, what's interesting with the, Check 21, got put in place as a result of 9/11 or kind of on the backs of 9/11, but you really never saw the whole consumerization of imaging of checks really kind of taking off until smartphones have kind of hit. And I think this whole move to electronic signatures, and I think if you can look at saying the digitization of paper, because I've certainly gone through reaching home equity loans, and it's like, you feel like you're killing a forest just under the regulation of pushing paper back and forth. So I think it says, how do you go back and use digital banking to digitize the right set of processes so that you can gain a streamlined process, but I think also working with the regulators and as a group to come up with the right sort of outcome so that you're not trying to live in a old world kind of regulation style. And I think that's what's been interesting with some of the banks that we've worked with. I'll make one comment around the Suncorp Bank, and I was with the guy that the CEO of their business services last week in San Francisco at Open World. And it was interesting. They've worked quite closely with the regulators to kind of get them comfortable with their approach. And it's interesting. They're using cloud computing to run everything. Their digital experience, their whole core banking system, they leverage cloud for test, dev, and all these other things, but production they still run in an on-premise solution because they feel most comfortable with that process from a risk perspective. But they are able now to stand up a whole core banking channels experience layer in 4 months. He said, it's like 6 months ago, I think he said it took him about 12 or 13 hours, but they're now down to 4 hours to go back and stand up that full environment. And so what they really see is this whole move to digital is allowing them so much tremendous business agility. And so I think it really has to be, you've got to work with those regulators to come up to speed. We're also doing the same. Next.
Excellent, thank you. All right, here, next question. So if I want my bank to have some of these features, how much will it cost?
So why I flagged that one is I'm not going to address how much does it cost on this webinar, but I think part of what I would say is what's interesting is I wanted to address this is it's not kind of an all or nothing proposition, and I think what's really key is how do you go back and consume the pieces that you need to consume based on the investments that your bank is making. And so I think it's not an all or nothing proposition. It's how do you go back and consume the pieces that you need to go back and consume. And what I would also tell you is around this is Chris Skinner. We did a digital boot camp in Singapore, and Chris Skinner, I'm sure many of you folks on this call have heard of Chris. He is he wrote the book Digital Banking and runs a prolific blog. It talks about a bank in Taiwan that had launched the Yelp Open Table app. So it was, instead of using those services primarily in the U.S., a bank decided to launch that capability and put kind of the payment and the bill splitting and all of that stuff on the back of that service. and launched it into their country. And it's now the standard app, just like Yelp and OpenTable are for us here in the United States. And so what I think part of why I wanted to respond to this question is, I think as a industry, we've got to start thinking around how do we go back and build these new digital assets that customers will want to go back and use. And so it may not all be a pure financial services set of capability, but these are how do we build other digital capabilities so that we can deliver more and more capability to our customers. So probably got time for maybe one more, Mike, so see if you can pick out one more good juicy one.
Okay, all right. Let's see here. Got a lot of different, let's see. What could we do here? All right, how about, what is your experience in integrating this digitization into a core processing provider? How expensive and how long does it take?
So typically what I would tell you is I'll answer this first. Most of the way we're building the software is in an agile way. Most of the customers that are consuming it, when we work with them to go back and deploy it, are deploying it in an agile way. So to go back and integrate these in with an existing core banking system, we're getting down to kind of weeks and months versus multiple months. Because what we want to be able to do is go back and very quickly and rapidly plug these back in. And I think what we've really been able to see is customers that have deployed an enterprise service bus, it becomes quite easy for us to go back and consume those services so that our RESTful services can go back and consume that and drive that integration. Where they don't have an enterprise service bus in place, that's another set of capability that Oracle can help deploy so that you can go back and help modernize the core. For example, we're working with customers that have Hogan in place to do that very same thing, which is allowing them to kind of unlock that value by consuming services. So it is kind of weeks to a month versus multiple months to go back and drive that integration. And then it gets back into how much do I need to have packaged together for me to go back and deliver that capability to my end customer. So I kind of answered that question in two pieces. One is, what does it take to go back and do the integration, which is very easy. And then what you've kind of got to go back and think is, how do I bundle and chunk that together in something that's consumable that I want to go back and deliver to my end customers.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Aubrey. And you were right. We're at the end of that question. We're right at the top of the hour. And we do always like to bring these things in on schedule, respecting everyone's time. So let me, first of all, thank you, Aubrey, for being here. It's been a great hour of discussion, and we've had lots of great questions, and that's always a great sign. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, and the audience, everyone, appreciate your participation in the polling and the questions. Trust me when I say we would not want to do this without you, so thank you for being here. I would like to let everyone know that's with us today that in the next 24 to 48 hours, we will be sending you an email with a link to the recording and also to a PDF of the slides themselves. So you can review at your leisure in the future. I saw a couple questions about slides. Whether they'll be seen again, they can be. You'll get those in your inbox, so please keep an eye out. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much.